Chapter 4: Negative Ions. Life processes, your life and your health, are affected by air ions, too small to be visible without special equipment. You have read and heard on your radio or television about the use, application, and values of negative ions. What exactly is it they do? Why are they so important to your health? What can you do to improve their benefit to you? Air ions are electrically charged particles. Very little was known about these charged particles in the air we breathe, and which man can now make simply and effectively until the end of the 19th century. The discovery of their existence, working independently, was made by Elster and Gettel of Germany and Thomson in England. Soon after the discovery was announced, biologists, researchers, and professional doctors in different areas of the medical profession started to research and explore the direct possibility that air ions may actually affect or influence biological and physiological activity and life processes. The greater part of the scientific community affirmed this belief in their research. With this historical background of scientific acceptance, we find today an indifference to the value of air ions. Many hundreds of science papers written by dedicated researchers around the world support the value, biologically and medically, of air ions and their beneficial effect on mankind, principally air ions of negative electrical charge, negative air ions. Not unlike many other natural sciences, today's scientific community chooses to demand more and more evidence of any good that can come from anything that is natural, without drugs, chemicals, and mechanics. This, we have found, is the general scientific response to our work of many years in biomagnetics, with the effects of the natural energies of magnetism on living systems, although patents have been approved and independently verified, and much of our published material not patented is used quietly by researchers and practicing professionals. An excellent scientific paper on the effects of air ions was written by Drs. Albert Paul Krauger and Eddie James Reed. Quote, "Biological impact of small ions." Science, Volume 193, 24 September 1976, pages 1209 to 1213. Dr. Krauger is Emeritus Professor of Bacteriology, Emeritus Lecturer in Medicine and Research, Biometeorologist at the Naval Biosciences School of Public Health, University, California, Berkeley. Dr. Reed is Research Associate at the School of Public Health, University of California, Berkeley. Their article stresses the importance of air ions in natural healing and health. Natural healing is an art and an important science gaining respect and acceptance within many professions, including the medical profession. It is no longer just a theory, but a factual science, and is demanding continued research and attention. Rather than assess the validity of air ions to you, we will, instead, present the facts that are the results of practical laboratory and life research, which, in our opinion, prove the effects on your health and welfare. Do air ions affect microorganisms? Yes, they do. As example, air ions affect and alter the serotonin metabolism of mice, small creatures that have lungs, a heart, and most their organs similar to man. What is the importance of altering serotonin? It is a powerful neurohormone which, when altered, affects the nervous system of life forms and thereby the entire biological system. Any changes in the air you breathe, the atmosphere, the weather, alter the value and amounts of these electrically charged particles, which affect your health and welfare. Atmospheric imbalance of air ions generally proceeds by 24 to 48 hours, more or less dry winds and high temperatures, known by names such as, quote, Sharaf in the Near East and, quote, Santa Ana winds in California. American Indians called these dangerous winds, quote, devil winds, or, quote, winds of madness. As these winds approach, and during their fervour, there is a build-up of positive electrically charged ions, positive ions. This condition generally occurs in any area of the world before and during a storm or high winds. Positive air ions act to stimulate and cause a rise in the emotions and general feelings of all biological systems, man and lower animals alike. Unrest, uncertainty, confusion, and anger can occur during the prevalence of positive air ions in the atmosphere around you. You are often affected, cannot understand your differences, and even with understanding, cannot change the altering of your conduct, as there is also decreased oxygen intake to your system. Negative air ions will give you just the opposite feelings. You will feel better and think better with a rested, pleasant state of mind. Your anger will be slow to rise. Problems will not seem as pressing to you. In this more congenial environment, you have a restful happiness in mind and body. Where the atmosphere is very low in air ions, positive or negative, the effect upon you is similar to a heavy concentration of positive air ions. It has been found in actual controlled laboratory experiments that the lack of ions affects seriously all living systems. The difference in having a concentration of positive ions against little or no ions is having too much energy of a stimulating effect to a situation where energy levels you need for a normal life, environmental atmosphere have disappeared or have been reduced to a level harmful to all forms of biological life. Basic and accepted understanding of air ions can be described as follows. The body with the lowest ionization potential, whatever body it may be, always results in that body's having a positive potential, whereas any body having a high ionization potential acts to have a negative air ion potential. Ionization of air is not the same as pollutants. This is all forms of toxic and non-toxic gases that cars, trucks, trains, aeroplanes, gas motors, smoke, and chemical fumes produce. The most dangerous of these toxins are carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and sulfur oxides. Under normal and natural conditions of our present environment, the air we breathe, about 75% nitrogen and 25% oxygen, contains various amounts of these pollutants with varying amounts of ionized air. This is called secondary pollution. Toxins and gases joining with ionization of air-charged ions and the nitrogen and oxygen of our air, producing results harmful to our health. Positive ions have an attachment to dust particles more so than negative ions, which could explain why the positive ion concentration is higher in cities and congested areas, as pollution will also destroy negative ions. When you wear shoes, they act to insulate you from the earth, placing you above ground. You can build up a high electrostatic charge, making you more susceptible to atmospheric effects. You take on a positive electrical charge in relation to the earth, which is negative. You may have noticed that dogs and cats, when they feel tired or sickly, prostrate themselves on the ground, pressing their bodies firmly against the earth. This allows them to receive soothing negative energies and remove positive energy of a low energy body or high positive concentration. The human being is no different in this effect. A number of Indian tribes, explorers, and other men in history knew that close contact to the earth gave one a better feeling. Bismarck, Emperor of Germany, used to bear hug a tree to soothe his nerves. Gardening, farming, and working outdoors have as much significance to our natural inborn knowledge of closeness to the earth as acquiring fresh air and sun. How often have many of you, from rest periods in military service, athletics, or any strenuous work, relaxed firmly on the earth and afterwards felt refreshed with new vigour and interest in what you had to accomplish? And you certainly have heard of, and even medical doctors prescribe, the benefits of kicking off the shoes and walking on the earth. Nature is the great teacher if we understand a little about what nature holds for all of us. We could strive better, live better, and think clearer. Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer really had the answer, so try it occasionally and you will find this benefit of nature's healing for your health. Clean, fresh air in the countryside is a balance of ions that must exist if we are to feel good and be healthy. Negative ions existing many thousands of times higher in clean, fresh air are your friendly ally. The city, a closed office, a home, a store, or any apartment is like a closed box with very little negative ions present. People living in or near cities or close to downwinds carrying polluted air wonder why their plants die, look so poorly, and fail to flower. The answer is in the fact that the atmosphere has a poor ion balance of negative or positive ions. The positive ion concentration is excessive, or there has been the combining of ionization with pollutants. Opening a window for fresh air doesn't help when the air outside is not clean and fresh. Moving from your area is not always possible or practical. Humidity and moisture content of air is difficult on persons with respiratory problems due to the lack of oxygen in the air. Though depletion of negative ions may be more significant in causing these respiratory problems. Centrally heated and air-conditioned offices and apartments also eliminate healthy negative ions, giving a preponderance of positive ion effect. In an office or apartment complex, it is not unusual to find variances in offices and apartments where you would just feel better by having a location with more negative ions available because of the duct and ventilation system. Yet little consideration is given in planning and construction of these buildings to aid the existence of negative ions. There are still some means you can employ to improve your atmosphere by your individual self-help. You can place a large pan of water in every room, even under the beds. The water will collect air impurities from the room. The air will be more fresh. If you place a pan of water in a room with flowers, you will see an improvement in the growth of your plants. If you are a heavy smoker or live with a heavy smoker, a wide surface pan of water in the room will absorb smoke odours overnight. Refill the pans each day. Overnight or in a few hours, you will be surprised at the difference. Leaving your television set on with the volume down if you're not listening will help to collect air impurities on the screen. You may have noticed that smoke near a television will be attracted to the screen. You would be surprised by the amount of dirt you can daily wipe from your television screen when it has been in use. The term, quote, proton, defines a quantum of light energy analogous to the electron. The more protons produced in your television set, the more positive ions, as negative ions produce very little, if any, light. Thus, the darker your TV screen, the more negative ions, whereas the lighter your TV screen, the more positive ions produced. The same occurrence applies to colour television as well as black and white emissions. Reliable research studies conclude you should not watch your television too closely. An electrostatic generator, such as the Van de Graaff type, is a long rod with a revolving metal ball that collects negative ions when in operation. The process involved can be programmed to produce enough energy to smash an atom. An ordinary plastic or rubber comb can be used as an oversimplification of a Van de Graaff generator. Combining your hair with a plastic or rubber comb will produce negative ions very healthy for you. This simple act of combing produces a tremendous flood of negative ions, which could last 15 minutes to 1 hour, depending on the amount of moisture in the air. The more moisture in the air, the less time the negative ions exist. So, if you're not up to your usual energy and you feel somewhat depressed, combing your hair can improve your negative ion environment. Mercury vapor lamps, commonly used for street lighting, produce a very high concentration of positive ions. There are X-ray, gamma and other radiations, some due to mixture of mercury with chemicals in these lamps, all detrimental to biological systems. Plants growing near these lights grow at night with very little flowering. The plants receive no rest periods, necessary for all living systems and sustaining life functions. High ultraviolet radiation can also be emitted by these lamps, which is very harmful to the eyes of living systems. While some men and women of the scientific community have contributed much to the science of fresh air, others have fought to prevent the study and development of pure air devices that could aid the average homeowner. During the 1950s, this natural science suffered a severe setback when a number of businessmen tried a big dollar income selling air ion generators. Exaggerated claims for better health and curing diseases were advertised, and the FDA halted the advertising and manufacture to the public. The researchers, scientists who were honest and devoted to proving the effectiveness of negative ions for better health, medical use and application, suffered greatly from these exaggerated claims. It was also during this period that Dr. Fishbein, president of the AMA, condemned any form of magnetic field as useless and unimportant. Again, the FDA cracked the whip and all such instruments were banned. Then colour lights were found by researchers to have beneficial effects on plants and to some extent on man. Big business with exaggerated claims took charge, and the FDA prohibited the sale of all instruments generating coloured lights. Now all this has changed, as scientific proof is becoming stronger for the serious use and application of ion generators, magnetic fields, and light generators. We hope to show the extent of these values, as well as others, now under serious research by men and women of the scientific community. Science is no exception to the commercial exploitation by large business interests attempting to make money on worthless claims. Overshadowing, often destroying, they hinder the honest work of dedicated researchers who do not exaggerate their findings. Also, today, as in the past, there are a number of scientists who will not overlook the opportunity to announce prematurely a product without sufficient independent testing, not properly controlled, or in the hands of the interested business entities. You see evidence of this today in the drug and pharmaceutical industries, with unsafe products on the market because of poor quality controls and insufficient testing on human cases. Due to public clamour, such testing procedures are now undergoing an overhaul, as well as procedures of the FDA and the HEW agencies in allowing these products on the market. It would be impossible to mention the research of most or all in their contributions to the science of air and atmosphere. Scientists of many countries are now and have been involved in this line of research. For example, in Russia, the research of the well-known scientist Tukhachevsky and his associates of the Central Laboratory for the Study of Aeroionification, Moscow, where after long and carefully controlled research experiments, it was discovered that negative ions will arrest forms of bacteria. Virus as Micrococcus, Pyogenes, and Staphylococcus, grown in special culture dishes, reacted to arrest and control by negative air ions, but not to other forms of air such as positive air ions. For other experiments concluding these findings on bacterium, a good reference is Georgi's Manual for Determinative Bacteriology, 1974 edition. Here in our research laboratory, we have confirmed the beneficial value of negative ions, as found by a great number of scientists. Air ions do affect your health and happiness. Clean air, negative ion air, unpolluted air is one of man's greatest needs for good and normal health. Negative air ions lower the air bacteria and virus activity in homes, factories, farms, indoor and outdoors alike. Here is a good reason for vacations to the seashore, forest and mountain areas. Oxygen consumption by liver tissue is increased when exposed to negative ions, and we are aware that oxygen is a natural combatant of biological bacteria and virus. This discovery was made by the scientist Lotmar after extended and careful test experiments. Also, water treated before intake with negative air ions. The treatment only allows a few minutes in duration, affects and controls many forms of bacteria in the water. This is similar to treating water with negative magnetic energy. There are similar effects from negative and positive air ions, and what we have found in our research into negative and positive magnetic energy. We believe our research findings and independent verification of our work prove a broader concept of energy and energy fields than is used in textbooks and practiced by most of the scientific community. Energy potentials seem to carry the character of definite effects, regardless of that form or shape of energy in nature. Here we have no hesitation in restating our previously published conclusion that the most important energy in nature, regardless of its type or form, is the negative potential of any and all energies. Please do not confuse energies with personality attitudes. A positive or negative attitude is not the same as positive and negative energies. Much confusion and misleading information is given in many books and publications on this misunderstanding. Our work shows that the negative energy of nature is the life-sustaining energy, the healing energy, the energy in the balance with the positive energy of nature that, when a little more prevalent than positive energy, is the better energy for life forms. Positive energy is an energy that promotes life in all forms and shapes. But when we conclude from our research findings that the positive energy must be tempered with the negative energy in control for health, healing, and happiness. More detail on the experiments and findings for this conclusion are found in our previous books, Magnetism and its Effects on the Living System, The Magnetic Effect, and The Rainbow in Your Hands, Exposition Press, New York. And in our later chapter, quote, The Art of Magnetic Healing. The presence of each energy is of the greatest importance to living systems, and a balance of negative energy control, or the use of a separate energy for a specific need and application, as mentioned in our previous publications. It would appear that negative energy is the predominant energy control for external environmental conditions, healthful to life forms, as it is for healthful internal control. It was through Dr. Krieger's research in California that the discovery was made that serotonin 5-hydroxytryptamine, or 5-HT, was affected by negative air ions. The neurohormone is versatile and powerful, capable of acting to induce neurovascular, endocrinal, and metabolic effects. Since 5-HT affects and to some extent controls necessary body functions, including those of the brain and nervous system, the evidence seems clear that negative ions or positive ions affect us emotionally, physically, and mentally in the way we feel, think, and respond. Negative air ions are one of nature's laws of adjustment for balance of peace and order in the harmony of nature. Dr. Krieger has opened the door of scientific investigation as to how and why negative air ions assist the mental, emotional, and physical activity of mankind. His research verifies previous theories of many years' work by a great number of dedicated scientists. Positive ions will adversely affect your emotions and physical behavior, giving you a sluggish mind. Negative ions encourage clearness of mind and body and are an important balance in nature to maintain the best balance in your environment, externally and internally. An example of negative and positive air ions affecting all of us is probably best described by our reaction to drastic changes in the weather. Prior to many types of storms, lightning, thunder, build-ups of clouds, and such, you may have felt dreary, tired, let down, sluggish, perhaps irritable and oppressed. You could say in justification, quote, This is really not me, but those blasted positive ions that have built up in this change of weather. Scientific certification now gives you this reason, although you should realize that science also verifies that, although we would react generally to this condition, we would act individually in varying degrees, since no two human beings have the same distribution of nerve endings or branches of blood vessels. Although similar, we are not exact externally or internally in our individual makeup. Shortly after a storm or heavy clouds have cleared, you will notice in varying degrees how much better you feel, less tired, more get up and go feeling, a clearer mind. Negative ions have swept into your atmosphere, the air is more clear, and rain has washed the air free of many pollutants and impurities. Many of you realize what a good feeling you have when it is raining. You know it is good for you. Perhaps you didn't know about positive and negative ions, but you feel good, so you find yourself and others saying, quote, "The crops need this rain," quote, "This is good for the grass." Humidity, pollutants, and other impurities may soon change this pleasant atmosphere, but there will be a time long enough for the healthy effects on you of air relatively free of positive ions. Evidently, there is some recent scientific validation that living at higher altitudes may lengthen lifespan, according to Dr. Edward Mortimer of Case Western Reserve University in a study recently completed on persons living at higher levels in the mountains of New Mexico. The study was inconclusive, and there were a number of speculations why this would occur, including the fact that only men and not women seem to benefit. It is known that in different areas of the world there is a longer lifespan for those persons, including women, living in higher altitudes. Europe, Russia, South America, and other areas have well publicized this occurrence. Whatever the ultimate reason for this benefit, one of the reasons should be obvious, and that is good, clean air with an abundance of negative ions. Negative ions and water have an important interrelation, which we have discussed more thoroughly in our chapter, quote, "Water, Humidity and Moisture." Generally, where you find water in nature, you find more negative ions if the water is not stagnant but is flowing, or from rapids or a waterfall. And there are more negative ions amongst trees and in wood growth than in open fields. In open fields on a sunny day there are more negative ions than on a day with clouds over the field. There has been much discussion and published material about keeping a good balance of ions, considered a level between, quote, 1,000 to 2,000 ions per cubic centimeter, with a, quote, 5:4 ratio of positive ions over negative ions. This is, frankly, not totally accurate for better health, healing, and happiness, as the biological system is more agreeable to a balance of negative ions exceeding positive ions, which is also more beneficial than maintaining 1,000 to 2,000 ions per cubic centimeter. Again, we see the significance of negative energy in nature, as we have researched and published, to be the more significant energy for animals and human systems. As for the amount of negative ion predominance, animals and humans can absorb before a detrimental limit of concentration. Neither our research nor that of other responsible researchers we have studied shows any possible limits at this time, although some studies indicate between 10,000 to 20,000 per cubic inch of negative ion concentration may be the most beneficial. In fact, the higher concentrations have shown excellent research possibilities in not only giving a better feeling and disposition, but to be a successful treatment for the future arrest of ailments and diseases. If negative air ions act to combat bacterial and viral disorders in animals, there is another indication man would be similarly affected. In our research laboratory, we have duplicated some of these cases reported by Drs. Krauger and Reeds. For example, we have found from our research that when increased negative air ions were imposed in the atmosphere of laboratory mice and rats, those animals infected with influenza had their systems reduced to arrest and control in a short period of time, whereas those laboratory animals with influenza in a predominantly positive air ion environment did not survive. No other medication or treatment was administered to the surviving animals. Another researcher of recent note in this field of scientific inquiry is Dr. In-Soo Kim of Korea, who has designed advanced technical instrumentation that could aid the medical community with suitable and effective negative ion atmospheres. This new and novel design was recently granted a US patent. Dr. Kim and his engineers have visited our laboratory, and he has acknowledged our existence in overcoming difficulties with his design and instrumentation, which generates negative air ions. Dr. Kim has broadened his research into the effects of air ions on fluids, compounds, acids, and alkalines. His instrumentation has been applied on human subjects in Seoul, Korea since 1976. Dr. Kim is a graduate of the Carnegie Institute of Medical Technology, Boston, 1967, and he served on the staff of the Research Department of Biochemistry, McLean Hospital, Belmont, Massachusetts. One of the interesting facts we have found in our laboratory research with tobacco smoke is the difference in positive and negative ions. Generally, it is apparent that pipe tobacco smoke produces much fewer positive ions, almost negligible, than does cigarette smoke. Differences in brands or tobacco used will not affect this conclusion. Cigar smoke also produced noticeably fewer positive ions than cigarette smoke. Air ions are very small particles that can be absorbed rapidly in breathing. Air ion generators available to the market do not all function similarly. Some of these machines produce heavy ions which take up more space and are not absorbed very well in the breathing. Heavy ions are not found in air. Ion generators that can produce both air ions and heavy ions are most desirable, since air ions, negative, are more suitable to breathing, whereas heavy ions are more suitable for biological treatment. Ions penetrate more at higher frequencies, while lower frequencies absorb more ions. Although the flow of energy in electricity is from positive to negative, and in magnetism circles of 8 spinning clockwise or counterclockwise, positive to negative, it is found in ions that the flow is negative to positive. Regardless of the energy flow in nature, electricity, magnetism, ions, gravitational, and atomic energy forms, they exist in a natural state of balance, expansion and compression, heat and cold, positive and negative, and where disrupted will again seek a balance of peace and order and harmony of nature. Possibly different test results published on a number of research experiments may show their differences due to the higher concentration of positive or negative ions in the environment during the testing period, as this control is not often considered in many published findings. This is certainly an interesting factor to consider, since negative or positive ions have different effects on biological systems. Positive and negative air ions, like other forms of positive and negative energies, do react on bacterium, virus, and other complaints. As the majority of researchers have found, high dosages of negative air ions are lethal to bacteria and viruses. Positive air ions can be effective under controlled facilities to overstimulate bacteria/viruses, thus killing simply by overstimulation. Not the best method when the problem is in a plant, animal, or human being. Whereas negative air ions, as other forms of negative energy found in nature, will act on living systems to arrest or control these bacteria/viruses. The problem can be eliminated and the living system will continue in health, healing, and happiness. Similar, although a different form of energy, are the two unlike energies of any and all magnets, their north and south poles. The south pole energy, positive in nature, with a right-hand spin vortex of motion in matter, reacts as positive air ions on biological systems. The North Pole energy, negative in nature, with a left-hand or counterclockwise spin vortex of motion in matter, reacts on biological systems as does negative air ions. The air we breathe and live in both work and leisure, plays an all-important part in our ability to live our lives in the way nature intended. Since air can carry disease as well as heal or control our lives, we should all work towards a greater understanding of this part of our natural surroundings. Our health, healing, and happiness will depend on our understanding and proper application of this natural gift to man, which supports his very existence on this earth. This is a table titled Similarities, Air Ions and Magnetic Energy. The headings: Effects, Negative Ions, Negative Magnetism, Positive Ions, and Positive Magnetism. Effect: Performance. Negative ions improve, negative magnetism improve, positive ions decrease, positive magnetism decrease. The effect: work capacity. Negative ions improve, negative magnetism improve, positive ions erratic, positive magnetism erratic. The effect: disposition. Negative ions pleasant, negative magnetism pleasant, positive ions depressed, positive magnetism depressed. Effects: reaction time. Negative ions decrease, negative magnetism decrease, positive ions increase, positive magnetism increase. Equilibrium. Negative ions improve, negative magnetism improve, positive ions erratic, positive magnetism erratic. Effects: metabolism. Negative ions enhance, negative magnetism enhance, positive ions irritate, positive magnetism irritates. Effect: pain. Negative ions relieve, negative magnetism relieve, positive ions increase, positive magnetism increase. The effect, allergic disorders. Negative ions relieve, negative magnetism relieve, positive ions increase, positive magnetism increase. The effect, healing. Negative ions enhance, negative magnetism enhance, positive ions irritate, positive magnetism irritates.